Welcome to Hindsight Hacking. I'm Corey Carter.
And I'm Ron Poole.
Let's get it started.
On this podcast, we've hacked hundreds of entrepreneurs' hindsight to help you, the listener, with better foresight. Now, guys, if you want to know all about what we can do to help you focus on being you, head over to gethhm.com. Keep pushing through those ups and downs that we all will have.
We're still going to have amazing conversations with amazing people. Hindsight hacking boils down to amazing conversations with some amazing people. All right, everybody, welcome back to Hindsight Hacking. And today we have a very special guest coming to you from somewhere in Mexico. She's traveling all over the world. She heard the pandemic was there in the US and just ran for the hills. But more importantly, Miss Marina Kirik, messing it up. But, today you guys are in for a treat because if you want to find a way to get your mind right, if you want to find a way to really work through all the things that so many of us, I really think we just hide from, right? I really think we don't always, we stay on the surface, and I'm guilty. And so today we're going to work through some of these anxiety issues. You could talk sleep pattern, right? Like all the things that Marina can talk about, but I'm going to read a little bit of your bio just to give a little more context to anybody listening. But Marina is a stress buster, joy finder, and holistic wellness coach focusing on stress and burnout prevention in high achievers and entrepreneurs. Her passion is helping people affected by chronic stress feel calm, confident, and resilient. Marina, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Corey.
Oh my gosh, this is like right up my alley right now. So this is kind of crazy. So I can't wait to get into it. But before we do, why don't you take a second and tell everyone a little bit more about you and how you got started in this?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Ron. So hi, everyone. Marina Kirik, and as Corey mentioned, I'm a holistic wellness coach, but as a result of the pandemic, I really shifted my focus to focusing on stress first and foremost. So I've been a holistic health coach since about 2017. I was a formerly chronically stressed, burnt out corporate professional myself, which is who I work with today. So I was building my business part-time since 2017, while being a consultant first, then a program and project manager. I was working at the fastest growing startup at the time and living in New York. So no stranger to the chronic stress and the busy lifestyle that so many of the major cities in the US kind of promote. And, living for the weekend, coping in all the different ways that I now teach about and coach about as being unhealthy, and just finding better ways to cope today. And as a result of the pandemic, last April is when I decided to focus on my business 100% of my time, after about 3 years of building it part-time. And I was seeing what we're all seeing, right? The global stress level, the toll that the pandemic was having on mental health, which was already pretty much a crisis, especially in the US and big cities in the US. Before the pandemic was just amplified so much more. And I used to work with a lot of professionals who do all the right things. So we eat healthy, we try to exercise, we know all the right things that we should be doing. And to a large extent, many people are doing those things. It's just that we are still fatigued and anxious and stressed, despite all of those things. And so I really pivoted to focusing on stress as the core of well-being, because without that, being in place, better stress management, I feel like, especially for corporate professionals, entrepreneurs, anyone who is a high achiever who's looking to build something great in the world, it's so important to be focusing on how all our amazing drive and motivation affects our mental and physical health. So I now focus on stress and overcoming stress from both a physical, mental, and emotional standpoint.
Love it. And I'm going to ask you some questions, but I'm going to throw this out there. Ron and I, we were talking about in 2022 running an event, and I just had this vision of like day one. Obviously mindset happens, mindset's a lot of things, and like the week one of a course or day one of an event, right? You got to get in the right frame of mind. Mm-hmm. But the stress aspect, like I just had this vision of you going to the room of however many people and just getting them in the right mindset, along with like eliminating some of that stress just through things you do in a big room. I don't know if that's what you do in big rooms or not, but I don't know. I just had this weird vision of you doing it for our event. So,
well, that's amazing. And funny enough, I am going back to in-person events next week. So as you mentioned, right now I'm in Mexico. I've been here for the past year, kind of optimizing for my own well-being, but it seems like in-person events are coming back. So I'm on the East Coast next week for a customer's offsite, doing desk yoga and wellness workshops. So I'm so excited for that to be back.
Nice.
Yeah. So good. Sorry, Ron, talking over you there.
Okay, so good.
But I wanted to ask one question just to kick this off. And it is, what are top 3 things that you recommend for people that you don't know? For people that you don't know if I'm internalizing all my stress or if I'm good at it, you just, anybody asks advice, like what's the top 3 things that you give to people right out of the gate before you really dig into that individual?
Yeah. So the way I look at the tools that I use with others is they fall in the bucket of the mindset tools and the mindset hacks that we could be using when stress is rising. And then also the physical tools. So how can we be supporting our body and actually signaling to our body that we're okay and overcoming stress from being stored and pent up? So a few simple things, right? As stress is rising, and I always get this question, it's like, I'm triggered, something just happened, I got an email, an unexpected bill, whatever it might be. What should I be doing right in that moment? So a couple of things from the mindset point of view. So I always talk about the fact that stress is actually a really beneficial response that our body has. We always think of it as just 100% a negative thing that we should minimize as much as possible. But on the level of the body, stress is there to keep us safe. This is the same exact response that we've had for centuries, right? And so even today, we have that with us. It's there to protect us, to keep us safe. It's just that our body and our mind in that moment doesn't know that that's actually not a life-threatening event. So it's up to us to send that signal to ourselves, especially when you feel that stress spiral start rising, right? We feel like the punch in our stomach, heartbeat starts raising, we start to breathe shallowly, all of those things, that cascade of emotions and feelings start to happen. The first thing to remind yourself, knowing that stress is there to keep us safe, is that you are safe. So especially with those that I work with that are high on chronic stress or on the level of anxiety, which is really thinking about like catastrophizing and thinking of the worst case scenarios, is just coming back to the present moment. And if you really literally have to look around yourself, take a look around your surroundings, look down at your body, just do any sort of a reminder to yourself that, hey, I'm actually safe. So this is just an email. This is, a bill. This is a conversation, whatever is happening in front of me, a news article that popped up on my phone. I myself in this moment am safe. So that's like the first thing to address with and between you and yourself and your body, to just send that reminder. So then how do you send that beyond just a mindset shift and a mindset reminder on a physical level? The best thing that we have, the first line of defense when stress is rising, is our breath. And for most people, we think of breathing as just a process that happens in the background of our life. It is a function of, just a response that happens. It's interesting though, because it is one of few things that can happen both on a subconscious level and we can consciously control it. It's the same as blinking, right? These are two really unique things where if we don't think about it, yes, it happens in the background of our life. And when we're under stress, if we're not conscious of how we're breathing, more often than not, we start panting, we start taking shallow breaths, we're like gasping for air, and we don't even consciously realize it. So the first thing on a physical level to do is to bring breath out of the background of our life into the foreground and to actually start being mindful of how it is we're breathing. When we deepen the breath, we send a physical signal, so not just a mindset signal, but a physical signal to the body that we're safe, because when we're under stress, when we're actually being chased by a predator or being threatened, like our life is at stake, we can't breathe deeply. And so when we consciously breathe deeply, we are sending that signal to our body that, hey, we're actually okay, we're fine. And it's okay to start relaxing any amount. And when you do start to drop into deeper breaths, you drop into your rest and digest response, which is the parasympathetic response that we have. We have two, right? Fight or flight, which turns on unconsciously and starts that spiral. And we have the parasympathetic response, which is the break to that happening. So when we drop into the parasympathetic response via the breath, we actually can come back to thinking more clearly, being more at rest in the body, and then we can respond to whatever needs our attention from a place of more clarity. So those are just like two favorite things, one from the bucket of mindset, one from the physical bucket that I always share with others.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That spoke to me so much. Like literally, I was the person that said he thrived on stress. Right. I love stress. Stress was always good. Stress kept me alive. I've come to realize I hate it. So that is something that is new. But I will tell you, I've never suffered from anxiety probably my entire life until recently. Until recently. And it's very interesting because I've had to be very mindful of the breath piece, right? Because I'll start realizing I'm holding my breath. Right.
Yeah.
And then the spiral, I spiral into like oblivious craziness. Right. And you said something that I'm the master of, the worst case scenario thoughts. Right. Yep. There's nothing positive that's going to happen in my brain. It's going to be the worst case scenario. And Corey knows. Corey knows I like that. Right. So for those types of people, how do you help them get snapped out of it?
Yeah, so I love that question. And my business is actually called Sum of All Positive. So I am here for that dose of positivity for everyone. Nice. And, it's really any of the mindset tools, mindfulness, meditation, reframing, asking more empowered questions, all of these things. It's building a mental muscle just like you would a physical muscle. We take our body to the gym, but we rarely do the same thing for our brain. And so as you're first starting out and you maybe are faced with a lot, right? For someone who's listening to this conversation who has a lot going on in business, at home, maybe health-wise, whatever it might be. And even aside from those things, the uncertainty of the world is so high. And so, Ron, you said, until recently, you haven't really been faced with this. Well, the higher the uncertainty, the more difficult it is for us to imagine any kind of outcome, let alone a good one. And so maybe in the past, they used to be a little bit easier. We can look to the events of the past or really be more present. But now that so many things are changing so quickly, uncertainty is so high, we have a real big need as human beings to minimize uncertainty. Again, that's a safety mechanism that we have. That's a function of our body and our mind want us to be safe. We want to have things be certain. So I think, one of the best tools to going back to what I said about this being a muscle that you flex and work on over and over again is recognizing it as such and giving yourself grace when it feels difficult at first. But tools like mindfulness, I am a meditation teacher and coach. I finally recorded my first meditation course, which I'm so excited to offer to others. Nice. It's a tool that we've been talking about that has become more popular over the past, I would say, like 10, 15 years. It's kind of like yoga. It became super popular. Now it's just, kind of a way of life. There's yoga clothes. There's just
yoga's
yoga
hard.
books. It gets easier.
I will tell you, I'm like, how difficult, right? So my wife and I, we were doing yoga and we suck at it. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It is really difficult. And my wife is super athletic and I am not. And it's difficult. It's a difficult practice, but you do get better at it as you force yourself to continue to do it.
It's interesting. Totally hear you on saying that you're bad at it right now. And there's, of course, a point to being realistic about where you're at currently. Yes. But it's the same with imagining better outcomes, right? I bet when you first started podcasting, it was awful, right? You're the first podcast you ever recorded.
Yeah.
We all have those things, right? Me in the meditation and yoga teacher for the past 7 years, yeah, when I have a beginner in class, I know that they're struggling. That's why we always ask, right? Who's new to anything, right? I'm sure you would have asked me, is this the first podcast you've ever recorded? We always give beginners grace and we give them space and we're kind to them. We just rarely do that to ourselves. Like when we're the beginner in that class, we're like, oh my God, I'm so terrible. I don't know where I'm stepping. I'm not strong enough. My muscles are weak. I'm not flexible enough. This will never get better. It's the same thing with mindfulness. And, when we first drop into a meditation, the very first meditation you ever do, you're just thinking the whole time. And you're probably thinking about how bad you are at it. And that's the reality for everyone. And we don't practice those things, right? Mindfulness and meditation is pretty useless if all we did it for is just to sit quietly for like 10 to 20 minutes at a time. The goal of doing those things is for the benefits that they provide to us in a real life. And those benefits come up during those times when you're anxious, when you're struggling to find that better case outcome and scenario, when you feel that surge of stress hormones happening and you want a tool to stop yourself from going further down that spiral. And I really love mindfulness as a tool because it really creates space from you and then the person who's thinking the anxious thoughts. You're the person thinking them, right? You're not the thoughts themselves. And in that space is where mindfulness happens. It's where you can see yourself thinking the thoughts and then choose differently. Nice. So really mindfulness is the space to choose again when you're thinking of yourself of 2021 was bad, 2022 is going to be even worse. I can't think of anything better that's to come. Pausing yourself, noticing that thought, and then, hey, is that really so? I can't predict the future. So could there be a better possible outcome there? It's that mental muscle, just like going to the gym.
Love it. Love it.
All right. I have a two-part question. One is, do you know, and do you follow or like Tony Robbins? I'm being in your space. I don't know. You probably know him. I'm not sure if you like him or not.
I do. I actually have been to every single Tony event.
Perfect. Okay. So this past week, he was at and did a few hours at the event I was at, Funnel Hacking Live. And I mean, he's gone like 4 years now. So it's 2 years in a row I've seen him there. But he made this comment, and I bring this up because you recently had a little blog post or something about imposter syndrome. And Bron and I, as we teach people to launch podcasts, we talk imposter syndrome. Like, the question is, why would people want to listen to me? Whatever. Right. And so the imposter syndrome comes up but something Tony said about it. And he was like, obviously he's a little more crass in regards to his language, but he was like, it's BS. And it is just fear. It is literally it's fear of us going to that next level. And I mean, it was, a long conversation on that, but, without going into detail of what you wrote on your article, I'd love to just kind of hear your take on imposter syndrome and on like, how does somebody just, get over it as quick as possible? Because I know we all feel it as we level up in anything we do. But yeah, give me your take on imposter syndrome, if you would.
Yeah, of course. I actually have a workshop on imposter syndrome, and it's something I talk about with my clients often. And the first time that I put together and gave my imposter syndrome talk, I had imposter syndrome about the workshop. So yeah, it's very real, right? As I'm going through my slides of having read a number of books and studied the mindset tools around my imposter syndrome at length, I'm like, who am I to talk about imposter syndrome? Like, I feel it right now. But first of all, I think it's about being realistic that it happens for all of us. Perhaps not someone like Tony Robbins at this point, but there's only a handful of people at his level in this world. And I think everyone else below that level still struggles with it, right? So still someone with 1 million followers is probably like, who am I to speak to an audience of X amount of people? So it's being realistic with that. I think one of the core takeaways of the workshop that I give is just normalizing the fact that it's normal for all of us. It's normal for our manager. It's normal for the owner of the company we work for. It's normal for the president. Like, everyone struggles with it at some point in their journey. And something I love, I haven't heard Tony speak on this exact topic before, but it's no surprise that he worked down to the level of underlying it is fear, is because in the personal development community, we like to talk about there are secondary emotions, and then there's primary emotions. And then there's kind of emotions that build, all along the way on that. So something like frustration, that's definitely a secondary emotion, right? That's not the core of what's going on. There's something bigger underlying that feeling that's really serving as that trigger for frustration downstream. And we like to think that there's only, working all the way down to the core emotions, there's only two, there's fear and there's love. And when we're in fear, we're moving farther away from love, and it's hard to feel both at the same time. So one is kind of an antidote to the other. Whether, that's kind of a controversial view I found among the coaching community. So if that resonates with you, just take it. If not, it's just interesting to think about. But the level of fear, right? Fear is what underlines imposter syndrome. I definitely resonate with that, because remember what I said, that stress on a physical level is just the body wanting us to be safe. And for so many of us, safety is our primary goal, right? Before everything else, before self-actualization, before having, a book published, before having a family and starting a relationship, safety for so many of us is at the core of it all. And then it's up to us through the work that we do, through taking action day in and day out from the time that we're born throughout our adulthood. We chip away and we create things in our life despite the fear and the mechanism and the need for safety that underlies all of that. And so, working down to that level of like, hey, beneath my imposter syndrome, it's really, the imposter syndrome is there as that secondary emotion. Underneath it though, what am I actually worried about? Let's say you have imposter syndrome about publishing a book. Well, maybe below that, you actually have a need to be safe, meaning that you don't want to go on a book tour. You don't want to be seen as an authority. You're self-conscious about being on video. All of these, safety things underneath it all. You don't want to be judged. When we work down to those underlying core things that actually underlie stress, fear, worry, things like imposter syndrome that are definitely secondary for us. I think it's really real that we're just afraid to take action. And so once we know that though, that's where those helpful reminders come back, right? It's like, hey, if I take this action, what is actually going to happen? How will my life change? And let's say that, just taking that example, because I am starting on writing a book, which I am genuinely looking forward to. But let's say someone wants to write a book, but they won't let themselves. Well, maybe they actually really don't want that, because all the things that come with that will change their life in the direction that they don't want to see that change happen. So it's really always really helpful to just kind of unravel that emotion that you're feeling, and just recognize that many of the things that we feel day to day are secondary emotions. There's something much larger, much more core to who we are underneath that.
Yeah. I love that you brought up the love and fear piece, because I agree with that 100%. You can't have fear and love at the same time, because they're competing emotions, and you end up losing your mind if you're trying to feed both of them. Right. And so I love that. I love that. All right.
To add on that real quick, Ron,
yeah.
In this past conference, they took out love, and I think on purpose, and whether the thought was already, and the understanding was already there between fear and love, but they talked a lot about fear and faith. Mm-hmm. And they brought it up in that sense. And it all boiled down to fear or faith. You either have faith that you can go and execute and move forward, and you won't die, right? Like, as the underlying fear, right? And so there's no certainty when you have faith, right? It's all uncertain. But the fear that wants the certainty, struggles back. And so they talked a lot about that. So it's kind of funny that we went to that subject there. So I love
and faith is extremely healing, right? So if you have faith and you can live in the faith there, it heals everything. Like it can overcome the fear, it can overcome all of these other pieces, as long as you have the faith, and your faith is strong enough to make those things happen.
Yes. Yeah. That's so good.
So I think that's awesome. I loved the being mindful part, but I also loved give yourself grace if you're new. And I'm probably going to use that one later in our takeaways, but how do you help people get there? because I know, I mean, that's something Corey and I, we struggle with. And as coaches or managers, it's really easy for us to just say, just do it. Like, just do it. Like, stop thinking in yourself. Just do it. Right. And that's kind of where we end up. Just do it and move forward. Done is better than perfect is what we say. But how do you get someone to truly give themselves grace in that area?
Yeah. Such a good question, and definitely something that, even with myself as someone who's building a business, it's something that I have to come back to every single day. Every single time you level up in anything, right? It's another one of those thresholds of it's scary. I don't know what I'm doing. And the imposter syndrome comes up, and you have to be reminding yourself again and again that you're safe, that this is a muscle that you're flexing, and to start and continue to refocus on what could go right. It's interesting that I think, for entrepreneurs especially, I think there's no point when you can really say that you're done. Maybe some of us who are in a corporate profession, we reach a certain level and we're just kind of like happy there. But I think, and maybe that's the case for some entrepreneurs as well, but by and large, what I see with people who are building something in the world is that every single time they reach a new place, right? It's like, okay, it's time to set new goals, a new vision. You look back and you realize that your goals have been met. And it's funny, in hindsight, I know this happens to me often. It's like, looking forward at a goal, it feels really scary and it feels like a stretch. But then when you reach it and you're looking back from that place of reaching that mountaintop, you're like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal. And it's like, when you realize that, like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal, is when we kind of start to diminish all the work that went in. And now it's like, oh my gosh, have to start all over again, have to aim higher. But recognizing that again is a path that everyone takes. And I know this is like such a cliche thing, but falling in love with the journey, right? When you're building, right, when you're actually in it, like you're ascending the mountaintop and something is within reach, but you have to keep working for it. I find that those who set out on big goals, big visions, the archetype of the person is someone who loves the challenge. And so once the challenge is met, it's like, oh, okay, time for the next thing. So it's really like, for me too, let's just take the example of me making this meditation course. A year ago, I had imposter syndrome around someone wanting to listen to me talk for 30 minutes at a time in their ear, helping them relax, right? Something like that. But now that it's all recorded and done, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so easy. What do you mean? Like, now this product is out in the world. I've figured out all the steps around it and it's ready to go. For me, when I was doing that, when I was actually recording the meditations, when I was writing my scripts, I take a conscious moment to like remind myself, when I'm in the building process, like, this is the fun part. And right now I'm super fortunate to be here in Mexico City, connecting with other entrepreneurs. I'm at a co-working space. So again, super nice to be in person in that creative energy. So it's in the late nights on Saturday night, we order takeout and we're all course creating here. And we're sharing experiences, and, it's so fun to be in that creative process of like swapping things out and iterating and what would be even better for those that end up listening to this, like thinking of that final outcome, but also loving where you are. And this quote has been popping up over and over again for so many days now. It's really funny, like social media, these things get picked up. Right. It's that you are currently living at least one of your former prayers. And just being reminded of that, right? Like, as you're going through it, like at every step, yes, you're going to aim higher, but like love where you currently are. And just be honest with the fact that imposter syndrome comes up at every single level. You get an opportunity to flex that mental muscle at every single level. That's how strong, the stronger it gets is through that journey. That's why you have people like, Tony Robbins, who are completely unafraid to speak to a stadium of 50,000 people. Like, imagine that. To him, that's no big deal. Right. And so we get to keep working and growing and building that resiliency through our own mindset barriers, through our own imposter syndrome. And it's like, looking back, how fun is it to see how far you've come at every one of those points in the journey?
Love it.
Yeah, so good, so good. It's so funny. And just from the entrepreneur side, Ron and I being around the funnel community, ClickFunnels community, the big goal is $1 million, right? Like, receive an award when you hit $1 million, but that is just part of this journey. Like, $1 million will be great for, the business for a year or two or whatever, but that's not the end goal, right? Like, the end goal is so much beyond that, even on the monetary side, but the fulfillment that hopefully can come with anyone's own business through achieving that, and through that journey, is just so important that people sometimes, I think, lose sight of. So this is so good. The timely conversation that we're having today is pretty fun. All right. So I know you mentioned hindsight hacking. Our goal is to get, our guests take on their hindsight to give our listeners better foresight. And so I'm going to direct my question towards when you made the switch, right? When you were stressed out, burnt out, building a business on the side, and things were crazy. And then you finally one day decided, okay, I'm all in, I'm building this business, and I'm going to help people with stress because that's where my passion is. Like, walk us through when you felt that moment, and then just thinking about, like, in hindsight, could you have made that decision sooner? Could you have made the leap sooner? Because Ron and I have our own story of, like, we had building the side business, both working full-time jobs. And then all of a sudden it's like, all right, it's time. It's like, we're burnt out working two things right now, and trying to do the family life. And then once we made the decision, we haven't looked back. Right. And so I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I love that question, because I realized that corporate wasn't serving me back in 2015, I would say. And I had this, like, oh my God moment. Like, I worked so hard. I got a master's degree. I hustled forever. Now I have a great job where I'm well respected, well paid. Like, I want to be clear with everyone listening, right? Like, it doesn't always, like, just because I was burnt out, I still loved where I was. It's just that I wanted something different. And so, yeah, that happened in 2015, but I actually didn't end up quitting my corporate job until 2020. So that's a long stretch of time. And I started diving in on podcasts and books, right? Kudos to podcasts, because that was like my entry point into personal development and really into entrepreneurship. Because before that, after that, I started reading the 4-Hour Workweek, and it was like the typical checklist of someone who's looking to quit their job. But it really started with podcasts. And Lewis Howes is someone whose community I've been listening to and following forever. And really, he was coaching someone either on a live call or on a Q&A. And someone was like, well, Lewis, should I just do it? I'm younger than I will ever be. Like, is this the right time? And he's like, hey, don't make decisions out of fear. Don't make decisions out of anxiety and stress. Be more calculated. And that really stuck with me, because when you first realize that for yourself, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in a place that isn't serving me. What should I do? Should I leave right now? Right? Like, a lot of, like, social media and things like that will have us believe that there's no time like the present. Right now is the time to go. But I am actually in, a different point of view of just like, no, be calculated about it. Don't make decisions from fear, and build something that will actually last. Because I also see a lot of people who do quit, and then they're in panic mode, and then they're trying to figure out, how to get any sort of income. And especially those who have a family to provide for, right? There's so many more decision points in play there. And so for me, that was really sage advice at that moment, because I, was in a pretty bad place of, like, the physical toll that stress was having on my body, the anxiety, the fatigue. But hearing that, I was like, there might be a better way to do this, a more calculated way, again, a more long lasting way. So, and again, it's not for everyone to just like quit cold turkey. I think for me, why I realized April 2020 was the right time to go is for a couple of reasons. First of all, throughout those 5 years, I worked on all my certifications. So my yoga, meditation, and health coaching certifications were all with me, as well as personal development events. I went to Lewis House events, Tony Robbins, and so many other seminars where I connected with other people, because in 2015, I didn't really know what the path forward would be. So I had to piece it together, and I had to surround myself with a community of other entrepreneurs, see how people are building online businesses, what's podcasting about, how does a person just have their own website. I knew none of that. And so it was like a really gradual step-by-step chipping away process that was so valuable throughout that time. I was also saving money. I always say, one of the key things to have in place is making sure you can provide for yourself, to not make decisions out of fear. And by the time 2020 came around, the way I knew that it was the right time is all of those things were first in place. So I felt safety. My need for immediate safety was fulfilled, taking care of the fear. And the second thing is, it was truly a moment where I knew I couldn't show up to work the next day. I was so excited about other things. And I quit, I believe, on April 3rd. It was a Friday. And I truly, if you asked me to and paid me a bunch of money to come in on Monday, I couldn't. At that time, I was just completely focused elsewhere. And I knew it would be a disservice to those that were working with me. So always thinking about, that as well. And so I really think our journey is our own, and comparing ourselves and learning from others is useful to a point. But yeah, it's so important to honor where you are. And with that knowing of my own process, I now give others a lot of grace as well. So if someone is, I know that I can support someone in coaching, right? And I'm so excited for them. And I know I could see it in their eyes, but they decide to now go through with it at that time. I remember back hey, they're giving themselves grace. I need to honor that. And there's the right moment for all of us to take a leap. I really think that there's no wrong turns, because it's all your own journey. So yeah, that's kind of how I made the decision.
I love all of that. And I know there's people listening that are like, how do I get involved? How do I get connected? How do I hook up with her? How do people get involved with you, and kind of what are you working on now?
Yeah, so I am currently still focusing on one-on-one coaching. I am always going to make time available for that, because that just lights me up so much. So to find out more about that, my website is sumofallpositive.com. That's SUM of all positive.com. That dose of positivity, you can always count on me for that. Nice. My Instagram channel is also where I post a lot of guided meditations that are free. And it's just Some of All Positive on Instagram. And I also have now the corporate wellness side. So yes, this is me speaking and reaching more people, hopefully more and more. I love talking to an audience and really seeing that progression of hey, stress doesn't have to be your reality forever. There's nothing that I love more than walking someone through that process. So I talk to teams virtually and in person. I do desk yoga, mindfulness webinars, different health topics. So I'm so excited to have that be part of what I do now as well. And then, like I said, my meditation course, I will be sharing about that more on my social media this month as it's finally available. So yeah.
Nice.
Love it. So to anybody out there, yes, the link to Some of All Positive will be in the show notes. Feel free to hit the link and head on over. But one final question from me today, and I wanted to focus on the food. And what is, in your opinion, all the fad diets, all that craziness that's out there, what's the take away sleep and water? What's the one food thing that you're just you need to go do that? I don't care what it is. It's not part of a diet. It's part of every diet. On the food aspect, is it juicing? Is it just plates full of veggies? What is your recommendation on the food side?
Well, of course, veggies are always going to be really nourishing, but what I like to talk about with my clients from the health coaching point of view is eating for your heritage. And this is, I think, still really rarely talked about. And I really think this is the key to why some people can thrive on a vegan diet. Some people can thrive on a carnivore diet. Some people can eat pizza and pasta and never gain weight. It really there's so much frustration in nutrition, right? This is like one of the most controversial things, right? Politics, religion, nutrition. Don't tell someone how to eat. Don't take away someone's like home cooked lasagna. No way. Look, this is, I think the missing piece is that when we're not eating the way that our evolution, like our personal evolution has evolved, thinking back to, where do we come from? What's our ancestry? It's so fascinating to actually learn and dig into what your genealogy is. That's why, my friends who are Vietnamese can't have milk because their ancestors grew up without milk. And now, of course, that population is lactose intolerant versus my ex-boyfriend who is Scandinavian. They can have milk all they want. That is literally one of the main food groups that Scandinavian countries have grown up with. So, beyond like all the different fad diets, I think it comes back to just listening to the body, noticing how different foods make you feel. And I promise you, there's usually a link between that and how your parents, your grandparents, and so on used to eat. So I think that's just like rarely talked about.
I think that is my absolute favorite nutrition answer I've ever heard. Like sleep, water, and your heritage. Like, come on, people. That's gold.
There's no one size fits all. That's why we all can't get along and we keep butting heads in nutrition. But it's like, hey, where do we come from?
Love it.
Oh my gosh. Well, we are so thankful that you came on the show today. We'd love to have you back another time if you have time, but we are thankful. Anybody that wants to connect, make sure they do. And shoot that website one more time.
someofallpositive.com.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Corey. This was so fun.
Thank you. We'll talk soon. Bye.
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 All right, everybody. That is another interview in the books. And I don't know about you, Ron, but Marina is pretty awesome. Like she's probably been one of the most inspiring like mindset coaches we've had around because she's not looking at it as she is the end all be all. She's looking at it as how to help the person and what is different for that individual versus someone else. And I loved every aspect of that conversation. So I know we'll definitely learn more from her in the future. But before we get to the future, let's talk about a few takeaways.
I got two that come to mind right away. And I agree with you, Corey. I think she was one of the better mindset coaches that we've had on the show because of how she approaches it. Right. And so one, awesome. But here's my two. And these are probably why she's good, right? Because she gives herself grace and she asks you to give yourself grace. Right. And I know how important that is. So you have to give yourself grace in order to be healed, to get through, to fill in the blank, right? So that's one. The second one that she said, and it was in passing, but it's super powerful, was work to build something that will last. Like it was interesting. Rachel and I were doing a Bible study today, and it says you people long to have a legacy and you want to be seen or remembered for more than the dash on your tombstone, right? So you got your birthday and your end date, and then the dash symbolizes your life, right? And so you want to build something that will last.
Yeah. So many good takeaways in there. But the one I want to bring up and is in regards to the whole conversation around breath work. And it's never been anything like you and I have really ever done. George Bryant is one of the few entrepreneurs I know that's like heavy into it. But the way like it kind of went back to it can bring down the stress. It can bring you back to the present moment. It can save you when you actually need to be stressed because of fight or flight type thing. But then the piece that hit me on that was, if you remember, Jeff Wickersham, like, he meditates every day, right? Like, and then I was doing it really good in 2021 for a long time, and I fell off the wagon. But part of me was doing this meditation, and it was like just trying to be quiet for 10 minutes. It was trying to get into that mindset, but it wasn't like if I didn't have it as like, this is going to help me throughout my day. This is going to help me beyond these 10 minutes. And I feel like that's partially why I fell off the wagon, because I wasn't looking at it in the long term, and I wasn't doing the breath work to get it to be relevant throughout the entire day. And I was just checking the box, like, yep, I did it. I did my workout. I did my 10 minutes of meditation. Like, you know what I mean? And so that just made me feel in all the ways that I failed in that aspect, and why I fell off that wagon, and how breath work and having it as a mindset of this can help me in the long run, not just for these 10 minutes. And so I loved every second of that.
Yeah, no, I thought it was great. And the checklist is hard because we live off a checklist.
Yep.
So, and look, I've done it. I mean, you and I have had plenty of conversations on plenty of examples of a checklist, right?
Yeah, we're checking off our water. Oh, check. Got my glasses of water in.
Check. Right. So we have to be intentional, so if you are trying to do X, Y, and Z, as long as you do it intentionally, you'll be successful.
Yep. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much for watching. I assume you're going to watch this at some point. Right. Otherwise, what are you doing? Come on, head on over to our Facebook group, check it out, head to our YouTube channel, check it out, or, listen to it on your favorite podcast listening platform.
Absolutely. See you guys next time.
Did you know that Hindsight Hacking Media Agency, we do all things podcast from launch? If you're already doing 10,000 downloads in a week, we handle everything. All you have to do, record it and forget it.
Guys, if you're launching a podcast, get with these guys. I could not honestly hit the charts without them.
I'm not getting paid for this, but working with both of you, the professionalism and the system that you guys had to launch the podcast, you guys killed it.
We want to help the impactors create an impact by just letting you be you and not worry about all this other crazy stuff. Connect with us. All the links will be in the show notes. See you next time. Go create an impact.